Welcome back to the Built on Purpose podcast brought to you by Yscouts. I'm your host, Max Hansen, the CEO of Yscouts, where we find purpose-aligned and performance-proven leaders. Today, our guest is Kelly Knight. Kelly Knight is the president and integrator of EOS Worldwide. I want to read a little bio just to set the stage for this podcast because I've really been looking forward to it. So we are here today because so many leaders are stuck in the chaos of growth, tying to their scaled companies without losing their sanity, their team, or their soul. Behind the spreadsheets, meetings, and big visions is a deeper problem. Most entrepreneurs don't know how to lead with clarity, build with traction, or let go of the things that are holding them and their companies back. Enter Kelly Knight. She's the president of EOS Worldwide and their integrator who helps scale the EOS brand into a global movement with decades of experience leading teams, aligning leadership, and translating vision into execution. Kelly has become a guiding force for entrepreneurs who crave both structure and soul. She's not just talking systems, she's lived them, led them, and knows exactly why leaders struggle to implement them. So here's the real challenge for you, the listener. Are you actually leading your company or just reacting to it? Are you creating clarity or chaos? Imagine what it would be like if you finally stepped into your true role, surrounded yourself with the right people, doing the right things, running on the system that actually gives you freedom. That's the power of EOS when done right. And today you're going to learn how to do that. Welcome to the Built on Purpose podcast, Kelly.
Oh, it is so great to be with you, Max. Thanks for that beautiful intro. You're all too kind.
I hired a speaking coach. He was actually on a previous podcast, and he is really a big fan of really setting the stage with good introductions. So the audience is ready for what's about to happen next, which is an incredible conversation and some insights that I look forward to getting into with you.
Well, me too. Much a long-waited time for us to get together. It's great to be here.
Awesome. Well, let's start with some stuff that I think will be interesting for our audience. Obviously, you and I have had a lot of time, have known each other for a while. We've run our business on EOS. So some of this is a little bit of a review, but I think for the typical person that's listening, I want them to gather some of these foundational things. So let's start with kind of like maybe a truth bomb. What's one thing about Visionaries that most people in the business world completely misunderstand? And why does that misunderstanding kill companies?
Well, I'm going to give you two if it's okay, because I think they're both so important. But the first one is that a visionary should be going it alone. Like, they're good enough. They don't need a second in command. So why would you split and have two different seats that are complementary to one another, which the visionary and the integrator is, because they're the yin and the yang of great leadership in some of the most respected organizations like Ford and Disney and many others that we've heard of. And so, but there's still that sense of belief that you don't really need it. And some organizations don't, but by and large, most can benefit from that visionary integrator duo. The second one that's a misnomer about visionaries is that they don't need encouragement for their advice, or they don't really need emotional support behind their ideas. And that, I've worked with 11 visionaries in my career, and I can tell you that it's 100% true that visionaries need that listening, strategic business thinker partner to listen to them and encourage the best of the best ideas. So it's just not true. Visionaries, they also need encouragement just like the rest of the team.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, when it comes to that, I think this is an important piece. And by the way, as you know, we handle a lot of second in command, COO searches, integrator searches. A lot of people obviously know about EOS. So there's a lot of intricacies that I might like jump into just because these are questions that people always have, entrepreneurs, when we're working. But talk about the nuance of an integrator communication style with the visionary, particularly when it comes to new ideas. Because I think what I have found is the integrators like yourself, and I know you're very humble about this, but they're very good at recognizing the ideas of visionaries and not like poo-pooing them, but also getting them to understand that there's a correct order in order to take these. But talk about the nuance in the communication style, because I think it's something that you do very well, because I've talked with you enough. But talk about how important that is and how it should be done.
Well, this one is really near and dear to my heart, and something that, again, my current visionary business partner is Mark O'Donnell, visionary of EOS Worldwide. And I think he and I have a very special relationship. And what I would say is, please do not become an integrator if you don't genuinely love the creative thinking process with your visionary. If you don't really like sitting and reveling in the new ideas and thoughts that a visionary may have. And yes, we can't implement them all, or not all right now, but you really want to be somebody that genuinely loves that thinking process, especially at the high end of the integrator spectrum, where again, you're at that high end, you're a strategic thinking partner, you're helping to build the business strategy, execute on that business strategy. So the big thing is just getting the time dedicated to do that. So often integrators, and rightly so, are attuned to a checklist. I have to get this list of things done. And so it can be hard to set that aside for the greater good of listening to your visionary. But that's where you yield the gold, the best of the best, the unique ability of the visionary. And so that requires some time, and you need to set that aside. And so my greatest encouragement is just enjoy the process. And if you don't enjoy it, please admit it for the greater good of everybody, and let your visionary find somebody who might be a better fit so that they can have that. I think visionaries deserve that in their integrator, and it's just not for everybody, and that's okay.
Awesome. Awesome. And being a visionary, when I hear you talk about visionaries, it's kind of music to my ears because it makes me feel like it's okay to be a visionary. Because in some ways we think about a lot of things and we want to implement too many things, and we need this second in command to kind of help us figure out the fast, most efficient path for the greater good of the company. Let's talk about.
And Max, I want to say one thing too.
Yep.
What Mark and I call it is playing tennis. So what's really neat is we happen to have our same page meeting every Monday for 90 minutes, but then once per month, we have a 4-hour thinking session together, especially the 4-hour one that we do once a month. This is where we sort of have a little bit more luxury to do this, but he'll come with some ideas and he'll say, hey, I was thinking about this. And then I say, ooh, that connects the dots to me to that other thing we were talking about. And suddenly it's this ping pong tennis match back and forth where we're building on the idea. And his original great idea just gets clarified in a way that I understand it. We can agree on what it is, when we're going to do it, and how we communicate it to the team. So a little bit of that tennis match can be fun. And the more that you do it, it's like building muscle. It's like going to the gym. The more that you do it and you exercise it, the easier it gets.
Awesome. I love that. I love that. Let's talk about EOS as a whole. Running on EOS, I think this is probably our 8th or 9th year. We self-implemented years ago, and it's been really great. Talk about why not everybody's cut out for EOS, and how do you know if you're one of them, like a person that maybe EOS is not for everybody, and talk about who it's not for.
Right. That's true. It's like anything. So EOS is simple, but it's not easy. So those that may not be a good fit for EOS are those that don't like accountability, okay, or don't want to have to enforce accountability. The leadership plus management equals accountability. We call that LMA. If you are a visionary integrator leadership team that doesn't embrace it and love it and honor accountability, you're really going to struggle with EOS, because that's how we get things done. That's how we get traction in organizations. Also, if you're not open, honest, vulnerable from a cultural perspective, EOS is going to be a real challenge too, because whether you're working with an EOS implementer or self-implementing, getting in and entering the danger and having those really tough conversations, again, for the greater good, is required to get the most out of using EOS. So if you're kind of like, I don't think I'm ready for that, I'd rather sweep things under the rug, EOS is probably not a good fit for you. If you're in a position where maybe you're not sure that you have the accountability chart or the team to be able to pull it off, you may want to postpone and wait until you have some key players if you've got a really strong integrator that can take the reins and get EOS through an organization. So those would be 3 that I would name, but there can be other reasons too. It just depends. But a lot of it boils down to commitment, accountability, having the right team, being open, honest, and vulnerable.
I love that. And working with a lot of leaders, I see some leaders that they don't really want to land on something and stick with it. So if EOS doesn't work out, they move to the next thing, gazelles, or they continue down this path. And at that point, it's just a leader that doesn't want to commit. I see it actually pretty frequently when somebody tells me that they started on EOS or they didn't, they're not on EOS anymore. And I start to ask, I look at the pattern, and it's typically that they just haven't settled into something and committing to it. So I think you're so right there. What's a common leadership behavior that screams kind of like I'm unclear, and what should people do instead?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what screams as unclear would be avoidance. Okay, so say that you're in meetings, you're in what we call a level 10. It's a meeting with a particular team, a leadership team, and somebody has a look on their face, okay? And the leader isn't calling out like, what's the look for? Or is not wanting to directly ask questions about something that is clearly wrong. Like you say, you've got a scorecard, you have a set of measurables, you have a target for each week, and it's all in the red. We're not hitting the numbers. And that leader isn't calling it out and dropping it down to solve that issue, to do what we call IDS, identify, discuss, and solve that issue. So whenever you're seeing a leader who backs off of calling out the thing that everybody else is witnessing on the team, because everybody's watching the integrator, right? Or like, she is not dropping down that those sales numbers are off again. And so that's a leader who is avoiding tough conversations, could be out of fear. Maybe they don't feel capable in their seat. It could be a GWC issue, which stands for a get it, want it, capacity issue for the seat. So that's what it looks like most often for me.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Let's go into the integrator role. I mean, I've loved how you've been crushing that role there and have really embraced it. And over time, I didn't really know this until I met Gino Wickman, I don't know, a handful of years ago, 3 years ago or something. And he explained he was the integrator. I didn't pick that up when I read Traction. I don't know if it's in there, but why is the integrator role misunderstood and underestimated and often hired way too late?
Well, the integrator role is misunderstood because that label, that title, and we're not title driven at EOS, we're function based, but it's misunderstood because an integrator can, on the spectrum of an integrator, be anything from an assistant to an operations manager to a COO, second in command, all the way up to a strategic thinking partner, president, and it's almost operating like a co-CEO. And so because there's so much out in the world, and it's not right or wrong, it just is. And it depends on the life cycle of the business, what kind of integrator you need at a given moment of that business life cycle. But it could be misunderstood what they do. So integrators are, the number one thing they do is lead, manage, and hold accountable the entire team. That's also misunderstood. It's different than a COO who doesn't have everybody on the leadership team reporting up to them. So that can be confusing. If you're more traditionally used to it, like an org chart, an accountability chart is about function, and it's about the 5 roles, the 5 key roles in every single seat within an organization. It's also misunderstood because the integrator is doing lots of things like removing obstacles. They're the ones that are responsible for the P&L and the results. They're responsible for great communication and oftentimes team culture. Sometimes that's a visionary, but in my seat, I feel I'm more responsible for that. So there can be even some crossover with the visionary. The point is that you're clear about the roles for the visionary, you're clear about the roles for the integrator, so we're not stepping on each other's toes. So that's where some of the confusion come in, is like, what really is an integrator? And it depends on the life cycle of the business, what that integrator is expected and needed to do. The reason why typically founders and visionaries wait too long is a number of things. One is they just don't know where to go find their missing puzzle piece. It's scary. Like, it's my baby. I built this thing. I know how this runs. I don't know how to find somebody who's really great. So in comes Yscouts and Max, who can help you find that right person, because it is not easy. So there can be some fear and trepidation around running the organization with somebody who may not be a right fit for you and might not be a right fit for your organization. Another reason is letting go of the vine, which is a term that means like it's hard to let go of something, or especially when you're really good at it. Say a visionary founding entrepreneur is great at sales. They're great at partnerships, but maybe their unique ability and best use of their time is doing something else. Can they hand that over to somebody else on the team? Could be an integrator. Typically that's not, but it's just letting go of the vine generally. The third thing is that integrators are expensive. They're more expensive than entrepreneurs think they are. And it's usually, when I actually coach entrepreneurs all the time, it's typically 3 times more than what they think it is. And so when they get sticker shock and they're thinking, oh my goodness, there's this part of the compensation and that part of the compensation. But the right integrator pays itself forward in spades. The ROI for a right fit integrator in your organization for where you're going will yield you so much in terms of like financial results, but also the ability to live a lifestyle and, the EOS life, what we call doing what you love with people you love, making a huge difference, being compensated appropriately with time to pursue other passions. So it gives you that lifestyle that you're looking for. So it's well worth doing. It's just a little scary sometimes.
Yeah, no, that's very well put. It's funny, I talk to obviously a lot of visionaries. I think my passion in life now and in hiring, after hiring, about 50,000 people or more, I quit counting, but is helping entrepreneurs get unstuck. And, this is a system to help do that as well. But I talk to, I get a visionary on the phone, and right away when I can tell they're a visionary, as soon as I say, what would it be like to have somebody in your company that actually likes holding people accountable, that likes building processes and systems, that like, all the things that an integrator would do. And they just light up. I mean, they want it so bad. But to your point, I have a lot of conversations. And when companies are too small, sometimes my answer is like, you need to go find this person on your own. You're just not big enough to pay a search fee. Or do you have an EA, to your point? Because you pointed out that, the integrator role can be an EA to a director of ops to, VP. It doesn't necessarily have to be a COO. So a lot of times we're always asking, I want to make sure that they have these other roles that have really helped them maximize their time first. So it's interesting the way you talk about that. The other thing I want to talk about, what are the statistics of visionaries first versus integrators? I know it's lopsided towards visionaries. Do you know that statistic off the top of your head?
Yeah, depending upon who you ask, it's a 4-to-1 or 5-to-1 as it's written about in Rocket Fuel. So that means 4 or 5 visionaries to each integrator out in the marketplace. But the statistics it feels even worse because you have to find then your right fit integrator for you and your company. But I know people call it like the purple unicorn. How do you find this? It's like finding a needle in the haystack when you look at the numbers. And then that also can be making you feel like, why even try? Because it's going to be so hard. But this is what I tell every single visionary that I talk to. There is a right fit integrator who can't wait to be your integrator, can't wait to be your business partner. But you've got to be really clear about what you're looking for. Most visionaries don't take the time to take a clarity break and get really clear and be honest about what they're looking for. Because visionaries are oftentimes people pleasers, they put together a list of what they think they should say about what they need to hire in an integrator rather than get real about what it is that they want, because they almost feel, I experience maybe even a little bit of shame, like I shouldn't want to have to ask for all that. That feels like a lot. And visionaries are very take responsibility. So I'm encouraging oftentimes visionaries to say, you have a right to want what you want. You don't even have to explain why you want what you want, but you owe it to yourself to be honest about it. And that's one of the things that I think is a missing part of the equation, is taking the time and getting real.
Yeah, 100%. I think for me, when I read Traction, I don't know, probably 10 years ago now, I couldn't stop reading it because it's so freeing to start to think about having that structure to actually execute what's in your mind. Especially if you've kind of run into some hesitations or just not moving to where you want to go. Talk about when it comes to visionaries, what do visionaries get wrong about their visionary self?
So I think visionaries sometimes underestimate their own self-awareness. They underestimate that, but then they overestimate how clear they're being about their vision. And so to combat that, it's really just becoming really aware of your own limitations, being really, again, candid and honest about that, and also pressure testing the clarity of your vision, because it's so clear to you, you're running 1,000 steps ahead of everybody around you. So to you, it seems very simple, very straightforward, but we're only as good as the lowest common denominator of the person on the team that's following the vision. And so that's where visionaries, if you can understand, you might need to spend more time with your integrator, because our Kolbe is a little different. The way that we think is a little bit different, and we want to understand. We want to get the clarity of your vision, because we're then responsible for translating it to all the other different mindsets on the team, and they don't all think like the visionary. So that's what I would say, visionaries. If you could hear that in me, is just kind of slow down, go slow to go fast, as we say at EOS, and that again will pay itself forward very quickly if you just slow down a little bit.
Yeah, and let's talk about Kolbe's. Since we're in the hiring world, we see clients using assessments in some ways that I scratch my head a little bit. But I'm a huge fan of obviously the late Kathy Kolbe at this point. What an incredible woman she was. But talk about I love it from the side of it talks about how work gets done. And I just want to bring a little bit more awareness. Now we could spend the whole rest of the time talking about it, but how do you think of it? I love it. We use it, mainly actually with CJ, who obviously is a implementer for you guys, and she's always kind of used it with us. And so we've got to know it really well, but talk about how a Kolbe really helps a leadership team understand how they can work together.
Oh, it's so great. Well, in fact, we just came off of our quarterly, Max, for EOS Worldwide leadership team. And we have a couple leadership team changes. So first of all, we use Kolbe in the hiring process with every single member without exception. That is part of our process. And then when folks come on board, we actually run the report that will show a team. What does it look like when you plot out the team's Kolbe across the 4 different dimensions of Kolbe? And for those that may not be familiar, go to kolbe.com. It's amazing. It's a great assessment process. So then you can see as a team where you might have gaps or holes. Maybe, you have a lot of high fact finders, but you're running a little light on quick start as an example. That helps you to see where you're harmonizing and where there can be gaps. And so that then informs maybe who you hire if you're going to put someone else on a team to fill those gaps. And it also allows us to know how to communicate with one another. So as an example, at EOS Worldwide, we're a little heavy on fact finder. And so I have to moderate that because I will drive my visionary crazy if we don't moderate some of that and move things a little bit more quickly. So it's an awareness capability with Kolbe that says, okay, well, if we know this is true, it might just mean that we have to change some things about new members of the team to get that Kolbe right. And in the meantime, we've got to use that information so that we're moving the team forward more quickly or with greater capability. So it's a great awareness tool.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I'm a quick start, which I think there's probably a lot of visionaries that are quick starts. And I knew that about myself, but the Kolbe helped like balance it out. And the funny part is my son, he's 20 years old and he's, halfway through college, and he always asks a lot of questions. Like, we'd be in the middle of a movie, he'd ask questions. And so I've come to find out he's a heavy fact finder, and he's now he's like an accounting major. That's just so far from what I would do, but we're wired totally different. But I've uncovered that with Kolbe a couple years ago. I was like, hey, can you take this and let me figure it out? But it's super interesting. Once you kind of understand somebody's profile, it really makes sense of like how you can work together and why they might want more information than you want in order to move forward. Being a quick start, I just kind of want to I take action. And obviously that cannot be the best way to start some things. So I am a big fan of Kolbe. I think that the simplicity of it, the amount of time it takes to get the results, I'm a huge fan. So if you guys haven't used Kolbe, especially when it comes to hiring and looking at your leadership team, it's a great tool. Let's talk about hiring, actually. What's the number one hiring mistake you see across EOS companies? I know you get to see a lot. And what do you think the actual fix is? I know these are big questions, but I just kind of want to throw them at you and see what shakes out.
Yeah, I know. These are all great questions, and you'll hear a little bit of a theme in the thing that I'm about to say, but that is when you are looking to fill a function within an accountability chart, a particular seat, it is getting really clear about what that person is meant to do, which seems like common sense, but also everybody has a number, okay, on the accountability chart. What is that one number that person is responsible for? So as an example, as an integrator, I'm responsible for a lot of numbers, but if there were one that I would hang my hat on, it would be EBITDA, it's profit. That's what I'm responsible for. That's a number I gotta hit it all the time. But each seat has a number. And so oftentimes we're not really clear about if there's one objective. There's a lot of things that a person's going to do. What is the one objective and how are they going to be measured at that? I would say that's one thing. And to also slow down to make sure we're really understanding RPRS, right person, right seat. Right person means an adherence to core values, whatever those may be. The right seat has to do with having the get it, the want it, the capacity for a particular seat and a particular set of skills and attributes that are required to fulfill those roles. And so you got to get really crystal clear on that, because too often we end up with job descriptions and interviews that are interviewing for something that isn't actually the seat that's being filled. And then, of course, someone's coming into the organization expecting one thing, there's misalignment, lack of clarity, and suddenly everybody's really frustrated because the hiring manager isn't getting what they want, and the person who joined is saying, what gives? This isn't what I even actually wanted to do or what I thought I was signing up for. So there's a little bit of clarity.
Oh, I love that. So I think what happens for a lot of entrepreneurs, because I've introduced them to EOS or they've kind of gone down this path on their own, but I think a lot of entrepreneurs think EOS will magically fix a lot of things related to their culture. But what typically happens at the beginning instead?
Well, it takes time. So EOS is simple, but it is not easy. So, there's a process that we have that's associated with what it takes for the first couple years. It typically can take 2 years for an organization to be able to run independent of their EOS implementer, assuming they start with an implementer. But upfront, you have to be really committed to that process. And it can feel stifling to an entrepreneur or a founder because they want to run. They're like, hey, I've heard about this EOS thing and I want to hit the easy button and let's go, let's get it going. And we do, but there is a proven process that has to be followed. So there's some patience and understanding around that process that if you follow the proven process, you will get where you want to go, but it may not be as fast as what a high quick start founding entrepreneur may want for it to be. So, there's 5 meetings sessions in every year, and it's a 2-day annual and then 3 quarterlies once you get beyond the first year. And then once you get into the pulse of those sessions, suddenly it becomes very comfortable and you look forward to it. But upfront, it's more time than you might have wished it might have been because all of your friends are saying EOS is great, but they already went through the pain. You've got to go through the upfront as well.
Yeah. I think from a lot of entrepreneurs that I know that really get in, stay committed to it, I think they run into an RPRS issue where like they go in thinking, hey, this is going to solve it, but they realize they have to deal with people issues like right away, which is the natural order if you're doing it correctly. So it's always interesting if they do it right that they address those, because that's the first thing. If you really go through it and you start to realize we don't have the right people in the right seats, it can be a painful start, but really the beginning of a whole new beginning. So I think that's really interesting. Let's talk about finding the right implementer. So I feel blessed with the implementer I have. I don't even talk about her because I don't want anybody else to like want her because she's all mine. I'm just kidding. But talk about finding the right implementer. Like what should people be thinking about when they think about like the right type of implementer for them? What have you seen the best, kind of matches and the best, way to go about this process? You guys have turned out a bunch of great implementers. So there's a lot out there. How do people find them and what should they be thinking about?
Yeah, so a few things you want to think about is, do you want an implementer that's right in your own backyard, that you are having your sessions together in person, or do you not really care and you could be doing virtual sessions? That's something that really has changed. COVID changed the face of EOS implementation that way. So now there's a tremendous amount of flexibility and we have 860 plus EOS implementers worldwide. So we can accommodate in person in your own backyard, and we can also be more flexible if you really are looking for a specific type of implementer. So other things to consider are you looking for someone who's industry specific? You do not need someone who is industry specific to implement EOS. In fact, some would say you actually want somebody who isn't that, because then they aren't a consultant getting in the business. Do you want someone who's tough or soft? Male, female, those are just preferences, and it's okay to have preferences, by the way. We have a warm leads team at EOS Worldwide that you can reach out to that will help do some of that initial matching to where you sit with maybe 1, 2, 3 different implementers so that you can get a sense of different flavors. They're all going to implement EOS holistically as a system. It just becomes, who do you have great chemistry with? Who's going to be the right match for you as an entrepreneur and your team? So I always recommend talking to a couple, because then that's where, again, they're all going to be great in my opinion. It's just, you got to pick the one that's right for you.
Oh, I love that. It took me 3 people to find the right one, and they were all 3 awesome. For me, you're absolutely right. The thing that I landed on was somebody that our implementer runs, CJ Dubai, runs EOS Pure, but is tough. Like this last meeting, I will say, our quarterly meeting, we all were in it, and there was a little bit of, I wouldn't call it disagreement, but there was, we're trying to figure stuff out. At one point in the meeting, everybody was talking at the same time, and she took order in that meeting. And I'm like, this is why we have her as our implementer. So I was kind of chuckling about it after we had some dinner after, and we're kind of laughing about it. But you're right, all those things matter. For me personally, also, I like a person that can recognize bad business strategy and bad people. So those 2 things are important. I think most implementers probably can do that, but I think those 2 things for me is like, there's 2 big things in business. If you really want to simplify it, it's strategy and people. You get those 2 things right, a lot of other stuff happens. So
right. You got to smoke out the people issues, because when you get the people thing right, all the rest of the issues work themselves out. And statistically, 82% of all issues that small to mid-sized organizations face, it's people issues. So that's where you got to focus your attention first. It's great to have an EOS implementer who can be an independent third party who's invested in helping you get where you want to go. And they can call out the stuff that they see, because they're like, I see something's happening over here. We got to stop. We got to flush this out first. And so it's really cool for me to have seen Gino Wickman and CJ Dubé and Mark O'Donnell in action doing what they do really, really well. And so we celebrate self-implementation. That's absolutely great. We also think that US implementers can be that party like CJ is for you, can be that person in the room who holds that space for you so that you as the entrepreneur, the quick start visionary, you don't have to do that too. You're not wearing multiple hats. You're able to just be purely in your own thinking, in your own seat.
Yeah, I have recommended to a lot of successful entrepreneurs that sold their business. They're like, what do I do next? And I mean, this is just my opinion. I'm like, you should go look at maybe getting certified, continue to charge forward. Maybe you build a business practice out of this. But I look at it like being an implementer is a whole nother skill of really helping and taking your knowledge and being able to really teach how they get trained by EOS Worldwide and facilitate. It's a whole gift. And to me, it's fun. If somebody took my job away, that would be one that I would consider, because you get your hands on a lot of stuff. You get to kind of stay a part of helping lead teams. So it is it's a critical role.
And hugely rewarding too. The what I call the cherry on top of EOS implementation is that you get to see so much more beyond the business. And what I mean by that is, there's these examples, so many examples that I get from implementers when we get together quarterly, where they're saying, hey, this business turned around, but the really cool thing was when you see, say, brothers in a business who have been at odds with one another, and their families have Thanksgiving dinner together for the first time in a decade or something. That is like life-changing capability when you're learning how to solve issues together. Something that should be really simple, but it's one of the most fundamental premises of EOS is to identify, discuss, and solve those issues. And so it's when you become an implementer, yeah, it's so cool, and you're facilitating and teaching and coaching, and you happen to make a great lifestyle financially, but also the component of it is so rewarding. That's the number one thing that I hear from implementers is, wow, I had no idea I was going to feel this good about the work that I'm doing.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I can see why. I think I got to see that firsthand with my implementer. We'll talk about the words, letting go of the vine, obviously it's in Traction. If you read Traction, for those of you that haven't, it's a great book foundationally to read to understand the EOS, the entrepreneurial system. But talk about what's the part of letting go that no one talks about, the hard, messy, like emotional part?
Well, letting go of the vine, where you're letting go of something that you've been doing, that you've been coveting for the greater good of the organization. Because you're going to go off to do something else so someone else can do it pretty well. But the hard part about it sometimes can be ego and status, meaning it can be really hard when you're like, I am the best salesperson and I know that I can do this and my customers love me, and we can rationalize all the reasons in the world why we need to maintain doing something when somebody else can probably do it as good, maybe arguably even better than us, but it's just a habit. We've been doing it for so long. The other thing too is that, when you're letting go of the vine, you're delegating it to someone else. And when you delegate well, it's not a hot potato. When you delegate well and you let go of the vine, you've got to make sure that you're training and teaching that person how to do it really well so that there's a great baton handoff. And sometimes that's done too quickly. And then you end up finding like, see, I should have kept that part of my seat because it didn't go well. But it didn't not go well because a person can't do it. The process was clunky. It wasn't well thought out. It could have been done a little more efficiently.
Yeah, I love that. I don't know if you're familiar with Dan Martell. He wrote a book called Buy Back Your Time. One of the things in there is 80% good by somebody else is 100% awesome. So,
Absolutely. Totally agree with that.
Yeah, so that even goes to your theory. Like, even if it's not 100%, but you're able to delegate that much more and focus on the more important stuff, the higher best use of your time is always good. A lot of leaders say, my people just don't get it. Like, I've kind of heard this. Obviously, we flush this out pretty quickly. But when that happens, is it a leadership failure, a systems failure, or values misalignment?
Well, it can be, it can be all of the above. So as leaders, it is incumbent upon me to make sure I'm being clear, that I'm translating the vision from Mark O'Donnell to the team. And it requires 7 times the first time, which means we have to repeat ourselves often as leaders, because the first time we might communicate vision or something else, the team glosses over them. Every time you reiterate it by way of a state of the company and a vision traction organizer, which is a 2-page business plan, or in a level 10 meeting, when you're reiterating over and over and over again, you're getting the thinking into the team, but it's not going to happen the first time. So sometimes leaders mistake the fact, they say, hey, I told the team this. I don't understand why they don't get it. So part of it is incumbent upon the leader. And the first thing we need to ask ourselves as leaders is, have I been clear? I have to point the finger back at myself first. And I often have to really document, how many times have I said it? How many modes did I say it? How did I communicate it in writing, verbally, in meetings? I've got to make sure I've done my part. Once I, as a leader, feel like, okay, I validated, I believe I've done what I need to in that regard, then it's a matter of the individual for whom, if that person doesn't get it, maybe they literally don't get it. Get it is that God-given DNA kind of thing. Like, I get it. I'm an integrator. I know God put me on this planet to be an integrator, and each person should feel that way about their own seat. So if they're not picking up on things when the training, resources, vision has been communicated, it might be that they're just not right for that particular seat. Might be a great person core values wise and might deserve a seat somewhere else, but they might just not get. They might not get the vision, in which case they're not a good fit for the company, or they might just not get their seat and what's required. So it could be a combination of things. You really have to isolate it, but first leaders have to look at themselves.
Yeah, well, I want to throw something at you. So I get a glimpse and kind of a window into companies that's pretty unique, because typically they have like an acute pain leadership issue, and they pretty much share everything with me for the most part, and us as, and I'm sure other search firms when they come in and do this type of work. But what I hear out in the market sometimes is there's this kind of stigma that some people, when I talk about EOS and running on EOS, they talk about how it starts to fail at a certain point of like 5 million or whatever the mark is that they have in their head. Talk about like why people say that and why that isn't correct if people actually follow the system.
Well, I mean, in fairness, EOS is designed for companies having 10 to 250 members. That's our sweet spot. That's where EOS works the best. Now, that does not mean we don't have companies that are smaller than that and companies that are much larger than that billion-dollar companies. So EOS can work, but it only works if you work it. So if you're not working EOS, it's going to fall apart. So sometimes as companies evolve, and EOS Worldwide has been guilty of this too. We are EOS and we run into the same entrepreneurial issues as anybody else. But as our teams change, the composition of what's possible and what's capable sometimes changes. And so you really have to make sure you are truly getting people who understand EOS, are devoted and committed to running on that system and not adding in bits and pieces work, and also going deeper into the tools. So sometimes, EOS will be accused of being too simple, like it's too cookie cutter. There's nothing cookie cutter about it if you're going deep into the tools, because the deeper you go into the tools, the more rich experience that you'll get. And that's what will help give it further legs to last longer in a growing organization.
Oh, I love that. What is the one out of the tools? What's the one that gets misused the most, do you think?
I think is the accountability chart, because more people in the world are familiar with the organizational or org chart. And an org chart is hierarchy based. The accountability chart is function based, and each seat has those 5 roles in it that person is responsible for, as we were talking about earlier today. So sometimes people will mistake an accountability chart for a jockeying of position. And so there's a lot of like ego and bureaucracy associated with it if you don't have somebody leading you through what an accountability chart is really intended to do, which is to get the right work being done by the right group of humans organized to fulfill the vision. So I think, again, without some facilitation, sometimes accountability charts will go sideways and not be effective, or as effective as they could be.
Got it. And what would you say the soul of EOS is? Like, what's the heartbeat under all the structure?
Well, the heartbeat is what we write about in the people book, which is, this greater good, which is every word of the VTO or 2-page business plan multiplied by genuine care and concern. So the underlying chassis of EOS has to be genuine care and concern, which bubbles up to serving the greater good. But too often, when we're thinking about our own perspective and we're myopic about my seat, and we're not thinking about how we all fit together to serve whatever it is that is our core focus, that's where things really tend to fall apart. And the genuine care and concern, there's no way you can fake that. When you're a leader, you either love people or you don't. And it's another thing that I will tell bubbling up, like, up and coming potential managers is, please, for the love of God, do not become a manager if you don't love the good, the bad, and the ugly of people, because you are going to see it all. And so where that ties in is you must have a genuine care and concern for people. And if whatever my day holds, Max, if there's a people issue, that everything else gets set aside until we get that straight, because nothing else I do that day will matter as much as getting the people thing right.
I love that. I love that. You are an amazing leader in the sense that I've actually had, after working together years ago now, I've gotten emails and communication from you asking for feedback. How important is self-reflection and feedback for your personal journey? And do you think for leaders just in general?
Oh, I mean, it's everything. It's so humbling. I mean, because when you're asking for feedback, you got to know you're going to get, again, the good, the bad, and the ugly, but you can't become your best self. I can't become the most masterful integrator that I want to be if I'm not continually ratcheting up getting that feedback. And some of it can be really painful, but I'm so grateful for it. And I've learned that I have to ask more now than I ever had to, like digging deeper with people that I'm seeking to get feedback from, because as we get bigger as an organization, guess what happens? People want to give less feedback. There's an irony to that. But it's so critical. So we have to be open and vulnerable and appreciative of the feedback so that we will welcome it and it will come in more readily over time. Yeah, very humbling. As an example, early, I still get it sometimes as feedback, but that I can be intimidating, which seems odd because most people who interact with me will say, oh, she's pleasant and she's kind, which I take as with great pride. However, one of the visionaries that I worked for, he said to me, Kelly, there's something interesting about you. He said, you're Mary Poppins until you're not. And like you trade out an umbrella for a hammer, and I'm like, it's so true. It's so true. And so there's those moments when I've not been as gracious as I could. I've been harder on people and friction filled and abrasive, and I've come off as intimidating. So it's something that I have to watch because I don't ever want to make someone feel a certain way. Maya Angelou had a quote that goes something like this: people will forget what you said. People will forget what you did. People will never forget how you made them feel. And so that's a guidance for me to remember that sometimes our words have lasting impact, especially if you're a visionary or an integrator, because the team is looking to you. And so it can come across as harsh. And so that's one area I have to continue to work on.
Yeah, no, I think you're an incredibly even keeled in the right way, which is kind of how you want to be. Just let's get stuff done. But I can see, I obviously haven't worked super close with you, but I can see if you need to get something done and you need to get a message sent, that you can get that message sent. So that's something that I've noticed. I'm going to ask we'll kind of flop back and forth, but I just want to make sure to ask some like more rapid fire questions.
Yeah.
And then I kind of want to get into like your personal journey of where you're at, how you got here as well. I think it's interesting, and just questions I want to ask. Some of it I know, and some of it will help me fill it in and for the audience. So here's some rapid fire questions. They're kind of forced to make you pick like a direction. So we'll see what directions you take. So you have to pick one: fire fast or develop longer than feels comfortable.
Fire fast.
Okay, that was quick. Visionaries titles are often earned or just made up. Should every founder actually be the visionary?
Not every founder should be the visionary, and it's earned.
Okay. What's your least favorite buzzword in business right now? The one that makes your eyeballs twitch every time you hear it.
Lift up is the phrase. Lift up this and lift up that and lift up that, lift up.
And why lift up?
Because it's often just not true. Like we're going to lift up an issue. I don't even know what that means. It's too vague, and it's just word salad to me.
Got it. And then what percentage of leadership teams using EOS are actually healthy?
Well, you'd have to ask implementers. I think they made a better gauge, but I don't know. I would guess 60, but I don't know. I could be wrong about that.
Okay, no problem. I love that. I love somebody that admits when they don't know something. True or false, most founders say they want accountability until it shows up wearing real shoes.
That's true.
Awesome. I love that. And then, so I want to talk about how you got to, like, what was your background prior? Because like I said, I know you're humble, but she is an amazing integrator and very much built for this. And I don't think many integrators have the range that you have of like where you've come in, where you've taken the organization and where you continue to take it. So talk about what your kind of background was and how you got into this seat of president and integrator of EOS Worldwide.
Well, thanks, Max. Yeah, I mean, it is interesting. I spent 18 years in the financial services industry. Came out of college having no idea what I even wanted to do. If not for my roommate's brother that was a financial advisor, I never would have gone into financial services, but I went in and took what's called a Series 7 and a 24 and thought that I was all that in a bag of chips to be able to help people with their financials. So I did build my own financial advisory practice. I sold it. Then I did a startup in Newport Beach, California in the registered investment advisory space. So all things financial space. That was sold to Goldman Sachs. And then I did a little takeover of a financial services company in Michigan. And then what knocked on the door was EOS Worldwide. And so there was a search throughout the United States looking for Don Tinney, who was the original integrator. It was the succession plan for Don to exit his seat and for the new integrator to come in and work with Mike Payton, who was the successor to Gino Wickman. At the time, I had maybe less than zero experience with EOS because I hadn't read Traction. I hadn't worked for a company that ran on EOS. I didn't know a single EOS implementer. I probably couldn't have been further from who they had hoped, which was to find somebody who had run on EOS. But the comparison was that in being in the financial services industry, I served advisors who served clients, and that comparison of I'm serving implementers or business coaches who serve clients, there was an alignment of business model, and that's how I actually got the seat, even though I probably, didn't tick that as many boxes as they had hoped on the job search.
Oh man, that's awesome to know. See, I'm learning a lot. But this actually is interesting because when we do searches and a company works on EOS, obviously we know, kind of know it well. But statistically, roughly, how many businesses in the United States run on EOS?
It's just over 1% of all target market companies run on EOS. Our goal is to get that to 2%.
Got it. Okay. So when we do searches, I have clients that'll say, hey, if they have EOS, experience as an integrator, that would be great. And my response is like, hey, if you just want that, then, you might be missing something because you're talking about 1% of the pool when, so your story is interesting and I might steal it and use it and, repeat it because clearly you didn't have exposure to it. And granted, it's a lot bigger now, but I always tell them no, we're going to go after and find you the best yin to your yang to the point you made earlier instead of focus on just EOS. I mean, it's a bonus if they happen to know it. The interesting part is the fact that only 1% do run on it, but I would actually say the percentage of people that are aware of it is way higher now. So you guys have done an amazing job. I'm sure you're aware of that, but I kind of feel like at least the small to medium size, we work with some bigger companies too, but most are small to medium size, fast growth companies. And they might not run on EOS, but I kind of feel like maybe 30 or 40% are aware of it, which is pretty amazing. I mean, that's a pretty big number.
You want to hear a little sound bite, a little kind of funny end of the story to my hiring process?
Yes.
So obviously I'm going through multiple rounds of interviews. There's 2,500 candidates in the pool and they're getting narrow down. So I'm in final interview stages with some of, at the time, members of the leadership team. It was down to two. It was me and another guy. And they do end up choosing me for the seat. However, I almost didn't get hired. And do you want to know why?
Not why.
Because I was too polished. And EOS is real and raw and, all this stuff. And this other person was like a science project for them. Like, oh, this will be great. We can work on it. And, she's too polished. And which makes me laugh so much, Max, because I'm like, do you understand how hard I had to work to even get this good, which I didn't even think was very polished at the time. So that was ironic to me because I'm like, I'm not polished. But so the funny thing is when you're interviewing for any seat, but the integrator seat is something else to consider is, who do you want this person to be? And sometimes you're going to take a chance or a risk on somebody. I could have ended up to be just a terrible fit, but for, the instinct intuition of, I think it was more so Gino and Peyton who were like, no, I think she's going to probably be the better fit. But that's just the irony at the very end. You can have two very different people and it's going to require just making a choice. You got to decide.
Yeah. No, I love that. I mean, I think when we're, at the finishing lines with when we're interviewing people with clients. I mean, it literally comes down to this simple, like, who do you want to spend, who are you going to enjoy spending time with more? Because this person can like walk on water and do all this magical stuff. But if the visionaries really doing what they're supposed to do and the leadership team, functionally, you have everybody in the right seat. At the end of the day, if you don't want to spend time, like sometimes I do see that, it's over when a visionary and integrator where visionaries like they don't enjoy spending time with them. That's when they're over. So I'm sure that played into it is like you are enjoyable to spend some time with, I'm sure. And that's kind of why it worked out. But also, man, being polished is what a compliment. Like that's what you want your integrator. In fact, that's probably the thing that I'd put at the top is like, we want this person polished because they're going to communicate to all of our team and hold everybody accountable. They have to have some sort of polish.
Let me just tell you, it was not a compliment at the time, which is just very funny. It's just a funny story because it's all what your culture is. And so if our target market is the plumber next door, you don't want maybe somebody but anyway, it's all worked out up until now. And I am grateful I'm starting my 10th year at EOS Worldwide and just so grateful for every opportunity I've had here. It has been the most amazing journey. Our implementer community, they're just the best.
So what would you say from like the way you were raised or like that? Or did you play sports, anything like that? I'm trying to figure out like if there's any roots that you have that have positioned you to be a really good integrator and leader today.
Well, I grew up in the Midwest, which is, we're just a hardworking group of people, I like to think, and you can find good hardworking people everywhere. But that was it's kind of a core value of my family. I was an only child of two parents, and my dad was an entrepreneur himself. So from the earliest of ages, I remember sitting at the kitchen table and he would be sketching out his ideas as a visionary. But he was also an engineer by trade, so he could figure out how to get things done. So, I mean, talk about having like the perfect role model of somebody who can do both, have the vision and know how to get there. And then we would go build it, so he was a carpenter too. So we would go buy the wood and buy the parts and put something together. So for me, it was a great dream to be able to see something all the way through from the idea all the way through to execution. So I think I just grew up with it, and that's maybe what's got me where I wanted to go. But I had no idea what an integrator was back then, of course. And it was only by kind of this path of zigzagging through my career that I ended up here, but I never could have predicted it.
Oh, I love the Midwest. At one point, the last company that I worked for back in 2000, so a few years ago, we hired skilled tradespeople in Arizona. And if anybody knows anything about Arizona, they don't really have like good apprenticeship programs and all that. So we started to just hire people, skilled tradesmen from the Midwest that had been through like some training, and they would move out, they just drive out, and they were majority of the time, they were like, this was our honey hole. We'd be like, hey, do you want to leave Ohio and come to Indiana and come to Arizona, bring your tools? And like they came out and it was great because again, there is not programs. So the Midwest turns out some really good people across the board, it turns out.
That's a great story too. And it's funny because my side of the family has workers who do that. So I'll go to a family function and like Johnny's not there because Johnny took a trip out to Arizona or Kentucky or Tennessee or something. So it's a real thing.
Awesome. I want to throw one more thing at you and then we'll start kind of wrapping up. But what's one of the hardest moments you've had to practice what you preach, and how did you get through it?
Yeah, well, it was about a year ago. When you say greater good, that is putting all of personal discomfort aside. When you know better, you need to do better. And I say that, and when I became aware that our structure, our accountability chart was just not serving our community well, it wasn't attached to our core focus. We had basically overbuilt our team. I had to take my own advice and basically let what ended up being as 2 rounds of letting people go. And we're a third of the size that we were a year ago in terms of EOS Worldwide team members. So I had to take my own medicine of it's as painful as it is. When you know better, you have to do better. And it required some pretty tough decisions. And that also doesn't feel good because letting people go is always a really hard, challenging thing to do, and the impact that has on others. But I would say that's one.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, anytime we talk about leaders, and we're talking about like vetting great leadership, I think the question that most people miss is they asking the question, how many people have you actually had to fire? And tell me about like the most difficult ones. Because I think you learn a lot about a person? Because as you told me that, because I know you so well, I'm sure you handled it with the utmost professionalism, directness. My assumption, another thing when I think about great leaders is you probably still have relationships with a lot of folks that you had to make tough decisions with. Probably not everybody, but that would be my assumption. And I always kind of find like that's a sign of a really good leader that has tough conversations, knows how to like tie loose ends up and continues to move forward. So I appreciate you sharing that.
That's the goal. And here's the thing too. You're going to be accused of a lot of things. You know what I mean? When you say that you're putting genuine care and concern and serving greater good, you're going to be accused of not being that when you have to let people go. And the thing you have to be steadfast as a leader is to say the two can be simultaneously. The two can be true. Sometimes we care so much about people, we have to let them go. We also care enough about the greater good that we have to do the right thing, even if it comes at, again, individual discomfort. So you can love people and care about them and make the tough call all at the same time, but make no mistake, you will be accused of violating your core values. You're going to be accused of doing the wrong thing. But at the end of the day, the integrator, you're responsible regardless. So you have to make those tough calls and let the chips fall where they may. So courage and bravery are just part of the seat.
What keeps you balanced? So like in that tough situation like that, what keeps you grounded in not letting the negativity get to you and continue the steadfast, like confident in your leadership ability and what you're doing as an individual and a team? But talk about that.
Well, and part of it is you just have to do it anyway. So even if you're feeling a certain way, you got to do it. But what helps me is my faith. So I'm very faith driven. So every day that I get up, I lead with two things with my relationship walking with God is love and gratitude. And so if I can start every day, no matter how bad that day is, like on the days that we were letting 38 people go one day and another day you're letting another 15 people go or whatever it is, it's just trying to ground myself first. Because if I'm not grounded as a leader, I can't not do anything well. So that's what I try to do, is to have that as a daily practice. I'm not perfect at it, but it is part of my general routine. And I'd say I'm 85% of the way there. And on those days I get up on the wrong side of the bed, I'm not able to be as gracious about that as I should, but it's a good guiding light to have on a daily basis.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, this might be a little cliche, but preaching to the choir, because I think, again, the leaders that I've studied and people that I know well, and not including myself necessarily in that bucket, but faith is the thing that is their number one core value in a lot of these people. I'm not suggesting it's the thing for everybody, maybe just spirituality or something, but faith in the way you just described it super aligns with kind of, how I think about it. And you're absolutely right that that's the thing you can control and the thing you can always rely on. So how about any last parting words? Like, I think there's so many. I only got through, I had some topics to talk about. I got through maybe 20% of them at best, but this was an amazing conversation. I just kind of want to give you the last, kind of thought on what we've talked about. Like, how do people, where is EOS? Where are you guys headed? How do people, get started? All those types of things that I think anybody listening to this for hey, some of this resonated. I want to learn more. Talk about that. So it's a few things, but I want to wrap up the proper way and give some people some calls to action if they want to take this further.
Absolutely. Well, we are very abundance minded at EOS. We want the ability for anybody who has interest in learning EOS to have the access to some free tools. So if you go to eosworldwide.com, you're going to find access to our entire toolbox. You can download it and use it with fillable forms and whatnot with your team. So please do visit there. You'll also find blogs and first chapters to our books and things like that. So there's podcast materials, all kinds of great things there that are all accessible for you. So do visit that. And I would say as a closing thought is encouragement, no matter where you are in your journey running your organization, no matter what seat you're in on an entrepreneurial team, my guidance is just take one step at a time. Sometimes in our really hyper, crazy, frenetic, chaotic world, we get lost in a lot of noise. And so if you can just isolate that very next step, take that next step, and that next step leads to the next step, it keeps you a little more focused. So that's my parting words on that.
I love that. Well, that's like a mic drop moment. You've been listening to the Built on Purpose podcast, brought to you by Yscouts. You can listen to all of our past and future podcasts at yscouts.com. Kelly, you've been absolutely amazing. Thanks so much for spending the time.
Thanks for having me. This was great.